Hello, everybody, and welcome to our January NADP monthly member meeting. We have a very, very special meeting today with incredible panelists, expert panelists on a very important subject. So excited that you are here today with us. If you don't know, my name is Liz Becker. I am the president and founder of the NADP, as well as the senior trainer of the Certified Divorce Specialist program. And the main reason that I am here and that we've created this for you is to be able to bring professionals from four different industries together that provide very valuable services to their divorcing clients and want to learn more, want to make sure that they have a holistic understanding of the process to best serve their clients. Divorce is never easy. It's never going to be an easy or a good process, but it can be much better based on how professionals serve their clients, how they communicate with each other, what information do they have. Many of you, I know, are amazing what you do in your lane, but it doesn't mean that you know the important facts of the other professionals involved, and everything overlaps. So it is imperative that everybody does the extra work in being equipped with the right education, the right resources, the right referral sources to provide your clients to really change that experience for everybody involved in the process, especially the children, which is why you guys are here today. The focus is about children. I always say that my catalyst in everything I do, no matter how much I love our NAP members and love my CDS alumni, all of them, I adore them, but I love children more. And that everything that you do has a collateral effect on the families that you serve. And it should always be, in the forefront of your mind when you are providing the service. So just a couple housekeeping items. Please make sure that you add to your name whether you are a member or not. So if you're an NADP member, please put member. If you are not, just leave your name. You can go ahead and in the chat box, put your name and what you do for a living. If you are a guest, I'm sorry, if you're a guest and not an NAP member, please put the word guest by your name. And you can go ahead and put any questions in the chat box. We are going to have a Q&A at the end of the panel discussion, but you can go ahead and still put it in the chat box. We can review it there after. And if you have any other questions, we've got Cybele here on the call. She's running the back end, so she'd be happy to answer any questions there. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to our incredible VP of Operations, Nicole Shapiro.
Hey, everyone. Thanks, Liz. So bear with me. We have 5 panelists here with us today, and I want to give them their due of giving. I'm going to keep the bios brief, but I want to give them their due of all of you to know exactly who they are and their credentials. So I'm going to start with Aviva Pinto, who is a CDFA and a certified divorce specialist with over 30 years of experience in the financial services industry and works with individuals in transition. Aviva is currently on the Financial Council of Forbes.com and is a frequent speaker at family office conferences and events. She is also actively involved in the industry and her community, serving as trustee and chairwoman of the Finance Committee for Port Washington Library Foundation. And most importantly, she is our fabulous director of the NADP Long Island chapter. Carolyn Laredo is an administrative law judge, arbitrator, collaborative lawyer, and mediator, as well as a trainer. She engages in the practice of collaborative, civil, and matrimonial law. Since 1994, she has mediated all types of disputes, including divorce, family, business disputes, and personal injury claims. She is well-versed in utilizing various conflict resolution methods, including transformative, evaluative, and facilitative. Carolyn has authored numerous articles on topics including divorce, workplace disputes, family and aging parent conflicts, and has hosted a radio talk show called The Conflict Negotiators. Carolyn is also the membership chair of the NADP Rockland chapter. Raquel Ramirez is a seasoned real estate professional with over 20 years of combined real estate and corporate banking experience. She's the broker and owner of Featured Properties International, which is a full-service boutique real estate firm. Raquel specializes in working with divorcing couples and anyone undergoing hardships. She has been a long-standing member and director of the Coral Gables chapter of the NADP, and she's also a certified divorce specialist, as well as one of the trainers for the CDS program. Raquel hosts a podcast called The Real Talk about the intersection between life, love, divorce, and real estate. And now we have, and I don't want to say the name wrong, Dr. Alina Yurkovsky, I hope I'm saying that correctly, is a
Perfect.
licensed,
Perfect.
great clinical psychologist in both Florida and New York. She has a master's in special education and learning disabilities from American University and a PsyD from Yeshiva University. Alina uses evidence-based approaches in her clinical work, such as CBT, DBT, as well as hypnotherapy. She specializes in treating anxiety and is also a member of the NADP and the BOCA chapter. Last but certainly not least, I'm really excited to have Ellen here with us. So Ellen, if you don't know, is a San Francisco-based documentary filmmaker whose works have won more than 50 national and international awards. With a background in international relief work, Ellen's films have focused on issues at the forefront of human rights. She began her relief work efforts in remote Mayan villages in Tabasco, Mexico. She has worked in refugee camps on the Thai-Cambodian border with the International Rescue Committee, in Vietnamese boat camps, with the refugee section of the American Embassy in Thailand, and as the director of the Cambodian Women's Project for the American Friends Service Committee. She's also been a hospice worker for the Zen Hospice Project in San Francisco. Ellen completed a master's degree in documentary film at Stanford University. She is a recipient of the Guggenheim and Rockefeller Fellowships, a Goldie Award for Outstanding Artist, an Alpert Award for the Arts, an Anonymous Was a Woman Award for the Arts, a Schenken Fellowship from Yale University School of Arts, and was an artist in residence at the Yerba Buena Center for the Arts. Ellen serves on the board of the Buddhist Film Festival, the Pacific Pioneer Fund, the ethicaltraveler.org. She's a strategic planning consultant with the Creative Capital Foundation's professional development workshops, working throughout the country to provide artists a cohesive structure to organize, plan, and sustain creative careers. That's a lot, Ellen, as Dad always say. She's amazing. And obviously she is the creator and director of these incredible films, Split and Split Up, which we are here today to talk about. And Liz is going to take you through these amazing questions for our panel to really do a deep dive into these amazing films. And we have Ellen here to start the conversation. And take it away, Liz.
Thank you for that. And thank you for everybody that's here today, for our panelists, our experts. You're all amazing, and such a great representation of what NADP is about as well. So we actually did this in person live in New York in September, and it was such a success in really finding out the way each professional in each industry is connected with the children and how the impact is on the children of divorce. And I want to start a little bit history with Ellen and I. So I met Ellen first, probably about 16 years ago, 15, 16 years ago, when I had my coaching practice, when she just first was launching the original Split film. And I was just blown away of how powerful that movie is. I don't know if anybody who's a CDS has seen it. I hope that others have seen it. And if not, we'll give you the link. You must see these two movies. But the whole premise of the movie it was following 12 children of divorcing families and really asking these raw and powerful questions to find out their perspective of divorce. What were they going through? And not only was that a success, but sure enough, we all wondered, what happened to these kids? And we were so happy to find out that Ellen had created and filmed a sequel following, again, with these 12 children, following them 10 years later and asking them questions, because it really shows a difference as they grow, as they get older, how their perspective is now, present, and also as opposed to how they were when they were children. So honored to have you here with us, Ellen, and start getting into some nitty-gritty questions about it that I know a lot of people have on their mind when they see the movies. So let's start with the first one. What was the process of finding and selecting the children originally in the first film?
Um, well, I want to thank you both, Nicole and Liz, for all the work you're doing, and I'm thrilled to be here. Um, well, as I was going through the process of divorce and driving kids back and forth to soccer games, I started hearing the kids in the back seat talking about uh, going back and forth with their parents and various things that were coming up as their parents were changing, their families were changing. And I began to realize that my kids would only talk about what was going on with other kids who were going through the same thing. And so there are certain kids that would get in the car and it would become sort of this little think tank in the back, and kids seem to forget that there's actually a parent driving the car sometimes. And I thought, wow, how interesting. And I started talking to these kids in my children's friend group. At that point, my kids were 5 and 8. And there was a lot of interest among the kids. I thought, well, what if we got together and you guys got to talk about your experience, and the idea was to really help other kids that were just starting on the path. And there was a lot of enthusiasm. So I just started very casually having conversations with kids. And then the word spread to the broader film community. And then I actually had people calling me saying, I heard about your project. My kid's great. It was like these stage parents, right? My kid's great. You really need to talk to her. And we interviewed 35 kids, and of them, 12 of them were chosen to be in the final film, and 11 of those 12 came back very enthusiastically to make the teenage film 10 years later.
Amazing. Now, what originally sort of answered a little bit about that, but what originally inspired you to create the movie, really? Like what made you feel that these children's voices needed to be heard?
I'm going two things. One, I grew up in a very Catholic Italian community in Rhode Island when back in the day nobody was divorced in the community. So when my parents got divorced, they really felt like the best thing to do is to just not talk about it. And I would actually hear my mother say, "Don't mention it to the kids," when their friends were coming over. Now, that was all well intended, but really it just stoked my fear, certainly, and the same was true for my siblings. There was just a lot of anxiety and fear because of the unknown. And I was surprised so many years later to realize that a lot of that divorce really was still the monster under the bed of a lot of kids, despite our good intentions as parents. It was almost too painful to sit down and have the real conversations with our kids. It was almost too painful in the chaos and of a divorce to actually be open to the idea that this process is going to be extremely difficult for the children. And because those conversations weren't happening, kids were remaining isolated. And so we kind of envisioned this as a virtual peer support group for kids. And it turned out that it's actually very comforting for kids to hear other kids mirror their feelings. And even the hard parts are probably the most helpful for the kids. So our goal was this was a film for kids to normalize this process, to encourage them forward. The 12 kids we chose were kids that were sort of emotionally stable, that had gotten to a place where they could be articulate and not sort of fall apart in the midst of the interview. That wouldn't be helpful to other kids. So they had to be in a particular place in terms of their own process emotionally and adjusting to their divorce. And then right out of the gate, it turned out to be recognized by divorce professionals as a very effective way to wake parents up to the effect of the choices they're making as they move through the process. And it's been used in many ways to encourage parents to make better and more skillful choices.
Amazing. So the original intent was for the children to help other
Exactly.
children, and then it ended up being such an incredible tool for the parents. Wow. And when you were filming it, did you already, when you finished filming, already felt like you foresaw doing a sequel years later?
No, the truth of it is, by time this film was done, I was so done with divorce because my divorce was finished. The dust was settling. The last thing I wanted to talk about was divorce. And look at me, 15 years later, it's,
Right.
that was not the idea. But what happened was more and more divorce professionals were saying this film is great, but we have a lot of families where we're dealing with teenagers and young adults, and it's just, do you have anything for teenagers and young adults? And we thought, hey, actually, let's see what's going on with these kids. And I contacted them, and there was such enthusiasm. They all making the film and was really a profound moment in most of their lives. I mean, it really was very empowering, and it's very true. The truth is, my entire career as a documentary filmmaker has been with survivors of war, genocide, famine, things that circumstances beyond people's control, and how they make sense of those circumstances so that they can move forward and continue living. And in many ways, this is very much the same thing, giving a platform to people that are not to be over dramatic, but survivors of something that's beyond their control as they work to make sense of it and synthesize it so that they can move forward as a whole person. And so there are a lot of similarities, and it's just simply giving the platform to people that's very empowering.
Sure.
And that was certainly true of these kids.
And how did you build enough trust for them to be so open on camera? Because they were just incredibly vulnerable, open, real. That was one of my favorite things that you could see that these children were not coached. They were
Right.
it was some of them brilliant, some of them that their parents, could have used better haircut choices. But and if
Well, a few of
anybody
them cut
saw
their own hair
if
for the.
anybody, yeah, if anybody saw the movie, you'll understand that. A little,
uh,
child abuse going on there. No, I'm just kidding.
yeah.
But how did you build that trust with them?
Uh, he cut his film for the interview, so that was there was one of the uh,
Yeah,
but
that's great.
you know I have a very particular way of talking to people when I am making films, and it's not very directive at all. I really believe that everybody has the story they want to tell, and it's just giving them space to step into that and tell their story. Each of these kids had a story they wanted to tell. I could have gone in with my 12 questions and blah, 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 but the truth is, very quickly, they came around to the particular story they wanted to tell them, the things they wanted to say. And so it's just making space for that. It was also helpful that I could refer to my own experience as a kid by saying things like, well, when I was a kid, this is how this felt, or I know for my kids, this part's hard. And so that kind of personal connection, I think, was very uh, helpful. And the truth is, even the shyest children, and again, I found this in my other work, even the people that you think, oh, they're not going to give a strong interview because they're going to be too shy or they're not going to speak up so much. It's amazing, again, once you give them the space
Right.
and they feel comfortable, they'll step forward and say what. And all of the stories of these kids fell very neatly into these chapters because there was such, it became so clear, the themes emerged organically and very quickly, what these kids as a group were concerned about, what their fears were, what their hopes were. And I was really surprised at how consistent for both films. It was very easy to figure out what the chapters were because they were just being repeated by every one of the kids. So a lot of shared concerns, shared issues, hopes, fears.
Amazing. How were the parents? Were all of the parents first, yes, that's fine, or did you have some kind of obstacles there?
Well, the agreement was that I was going to have a conversation with kids without the parents present. Everybody had to feel comfortable with that. And the agreement was that both the children and the parents would have the rights to cut any material once the film or decide to withdraw from the project. And so, as a filmmaker, that's giving a lot of that's a difficult situation to put yourself in, and it's quite rare to do that because of so many production complications and whatever. You could spend a lot of time editing a film, and then if somebody pulls out at the last minute when you're at rough cut or fine cut, you're in kind of big trouble. So, it was a little nerve-wracking. And we did some kind of focus group screenings with the kids themselves and other kids. And there was only one request at the very last moment, literally 2 days before the big opening in San Francisco, where all the families were present. And it was one boy that felt uncomfortable about a comment he made about his father drinking. And so we pulled that out. So, but, oh, and, the parents were very respectful, except that one, I did one interview on the in my house, and the mother's like, I'm going to go upstairs and just work in your office while you interview him. And I said, okay. And midway through the interview, she came to the top of the stairs and said, Ellen, could I talk to you for a minute? And I said, what's up? She said, I'm having a little internet problem. And I went up and she said, oh, when he was talking about this, I really want you to ask him this and that. And she had her ear to the stairs the whole time and listened to everything that was being said. So I thought, she just couldn't resist knowing what's inside of her kid's heart and mind at that moment. I get it, but it was like, oh my gosh. So that was the only time we had a little,
Definitely. I mean, I'm just thinking myself, having been a single mother, and if I were the parent, I would, being the A type that I am and the control freak that I am, I would probably be that mother. I'd be like, oh, what's he saying? How is this going to make me look? Right? We all, I think, have that. So I could imagine that it's hard for us. And that's another reason why the movie's so amazing, because it brings in your mind things that maybe you didn't realize as a parent that your child felt. We all think, oh, we're great. We got this under control. So it's wonderful. Do you think that you're going to revisit them in another 10 years? Is this something that's on your radar?
I might, I hesitate to say for sure. But clearly it's been such a central drama and theme in my life. I mean, I think we all know this, working in this, divorce doesn't happen and then 5 months later, okay, that's done, let's move on. It's part of your reality, right? It's part of your central drama often as a child or a parent. And that's certainly true for me and my siblings. I'm sure that's true of my kids. So, I'm interested in it from just a human perspective, how people grow, how they heal, how they move forward, how people make sense of trauma and tell the story of their life, and how that changes with time and with relationships. And so it interests me, but no promises. Who knows what's happening in the next 10 years, right?
Well, I think what's amazing about it is that it started off as a film to share voices, but it's research. It's
Yes.
one of the best research studies that could be out there, following their lives, as young adults, then older adults, they're going to have their families. I think it's amazing. So I would urge you to definitely think about it.
I just want to say quickly one more thing, which is the biggest surprise to me for the second film, Split Up the Teen Years, was how much kids spoke about how their parents' divorce influenced the way they think about their romantic relationships.
Oh, yeah.
Now, it seems obvious. Now my children are young adults. I see it with them.
Sure, me too.
And that's hard as a parent. And of course, that's the truth of it, right? It's their patterning. It's their experience, the examples that have been before them. And so that was a surprise and, like I say, quite sobering as a parent.
Yeah, absolutely. Agreed. I see that also with my son. We see it, I think, with all of our children that come from divorced families, that they will hesitate a little bit, or, yeah. Well, thank you so much for all of those. I'm probably going to end up with you again after we have our expert panels right before the Q&A. But I do want to go ahead and move forward with now looking at specific industries, right? And how it really impacts the process. So we're going to start with Alina. Thank you for being here, Alina. So in Split Up, and of course, all of our panelists have seen both movies. So in Split Up, now the older children reflected on their earlier experiences with new perspectives. So how do you interpret that evolution, right? What do you think it suggests about the kind of emotional support families need over time?
Right. Well, I mean, it was what was evident. I apologize, everybody, for my voice. I'm getting over a cold. Um, it was evident in the first film when they were younger that they were, number one, helpless to influence what was going on, and they had to figure out how to cope. They had to figure out how to manage their own emotions at the time. They all spoke about a great deal of confusion. None of them were really understanding exactly what was happening. All they could hear it, they could see the conflict, but it was tremendously difficult for all of them to understand really what's going on and what to do about it, how to navigate their own emotions, how to regulate themselves in the face of conflict. And what was also evident is that they were all parentified children. They were all, implanted with the seeds of what we call like codependence, of I need to figure out how to make the people around me feel good again. They had to shove down their own feelings, and each person does it in a different way. So one child might, present with the happy face. One child might present with anger. Another child might present with sadness. Another child might present with just avoidance, avoidance. Nothing is happening. Everything is okay. Just dissociation. And I think that what is needed from parents is first and foremost validation. First and foremost, to sit down with their child to say, I what you're noticing is true, to validate it, not to leave them in a state of confusion. You saw mommy lose it, and that was real. You saw the truth. Mommy lost control of her emotions. She reached a point of frustration and anger and lost control. So I think the two most important things, I listen to Dr. Becky Kennedy a lot. She's like this foremost parenting guru right now in the culture. And she talks a lot about validation, and she has a TED talk on the number one most important parenting skill, which is repair. And I think it's not just the number one parenting skill, it's the number one relationship skill across the board, repair. Because if the adults, the parents in these films that were being discussed, if they had that skill, it would not have escalated to what the kids were subjected to over and over again. If even if there was a blow up, and it happens in every home. There are no perfect homes, there are no perfect parents, no perfect relationships. But to then say, yes, I lost it, dad lost it, and I'm sorry, how was that for you? Was it scary? Was it confusing? How are you feeling? And we need to do better. We need to learn better anger management skills. We need to learn better ways of speaking to each other, because I know it's really hard for you when that happens. It seemed from their stories that these kids really fell through the cracks, or at least that's how they felt. The parents were so engaged in their drama with each other that what the kids were experiencing was kind of a secondary issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And after watching both films, what message do you hope that every professional takes away about how to better protect and support children from the divorce? So that was great advice on the parent side of it. What about the professionals that are involved?
Well, the professionals, meaning the lawyers, the
Yeah,
financial.
everybody that's everybody who's on the call here. So, what can they do? Because realistically, most professionals are dealing with the parent. They don't deal with the children. The only ones that see the children might be the realtors, right? Possibly the attorneys, very rarely, usually don't see the children, or the mental health professionals, but everybody else that's involved in the process really doesn't deal directly with the children. So, as a way of, I guess, a collateral support, right? What do you think is important?
I mean, I think that mental health involvement should be recommended and supported with actual professionals, with people that are really trained in uh, conveying and cultivating emotional regulation. This is such a key word, the emotional regulation for the parents. How do they expect their kids to emotionally regulate if there's not a model for it?
Right. Yeah.
Number first and foremost, it's actually making me think of, like, maybe I should start a group for people who are not divorced yet, but in high conflict relationships. And so to teach these crucial skills, the emotional regulation, the validation, the repair.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think and I mentioned this in the CDS as well whenever I train, I don't think professionals understand that when they're helping their clients as best as they can in many, many ways, and they're dealing with all their own obstacles of their client's emotional state, inconsistencies or the high conflict even with the client. Rightfully so, because they're going through a horrible process, having to make thousands of decisions that they're not equipped to make. And I don't think the professionals realize that when their client walks out of their office, possibly angry, upset, confused, scared, all of those emotions the children will be feeling when they get home. And I don't think they directly connect that. And I think that if you do have that in mind and you make it as an intention 100%, that you want to make sure that your client, regardless of what's happening at the meeting, at least walks out emotionally regulated so that when they come home, they're not putting it on their children, I think is a really important thing to put in mind and
You're
maybe.
right. I think that's an excellent point, and that should be included in all training of divorce professionals
Exactly. Yeah.
across disciplines.
Absolutely. That's why we include it. It's so important. Well, thank you, Alina. Thank you for
Thank
There's
you.
one question for Alina in the
Yeah.
chat is if you could share again the name of the parenting guru. Someone's asking about that.
Oh, I have her book right here. Dr. Becky Kennedy, Good Inside.
good inside. Oh,
Yeah,
that's a
she has a
great name.
great podcast. She has a great Instagram.
Yeah, someone asked.
Follow her.
Thank you.
Thank you. Carolyn, legal, the harshest part of it all. Uh, I'm gonna ask you in reference to Split Up because we're talking about the second movie in this question. We saw how the effects of parents' choices continued to shape the children's lives years later, clearly. How might attorneys encourage clients to think about the long-term impact of their legal decisions beyond just a settlement?
Yeah, and this ties into what you were just talking about, I feel, in that, and I can tell you just from a personal note, as a child of divorce, that definitely the tone of the attorneys really set the framework for the whole family dynamic, in my situation especially. And it changed the trajectory of my own career because when I went into law school, I wanted to help people. I wanted to give people a voice. I wanted to fight for people. And I remember my parents and this movie, the movies that you did, Ellen, thank you, brought all of this up. Where I remember calling during my first year of law school, my mother's attorney, and saying, she's not capable of making these decisions that you're asking her to do. She's very depressed. And I was worried for her life. My sister and I were panicked. I mean, we couldn't sleep. I couldn't study. I couldn't do anything. And if you can believe it, his response was, this is none of your business, butt out. And he hung up on me. There was no guidance, no coach. After that, I swore that was not the way I was going to use my degree. And I then started looking and realizing that where in law school were we taught how to manage our clients' emotions? Where were we taught how to, teach them the long-term impact of what we bring to the mix and the family dynamics? And I started taking mediation courses, hence I became an attorney mediator. So in preparation for this discussion, I did jot down some notes that I wanted to pass along for attorneys and mediators just to make sure that I didn't forget, but I see the attorney's role more, not just as an advocate, but as a strategic counselor. And I do that in my mediations as well. I'm in my lane. I'm not doing therapy. I'm not giving diagnoses, but I recognize the emotional aspect of what each family member is going through, because I see it even now in another generation with my nephews, how they need to seat my parents in two separate. My nephew just got married in May. His grandparents had to be seated in completely different sides of the room and couldn't walk down. They had to be separated by people in the aisle, not because they had a conflict, but because of the enormous stress they had in being in the room together. And it dominated, and it continues to dominate all holidays and all special events. It has never ended. And I hope in my practice, I don't do that to other families. So strategic counselor is how I see it. And so I feel that when professionals approach this, when clients feel heard and informed and guided through future implications of their decisions, they're more likely to make decisions that they can live with long term after the case is closed. After we all walk out, they still need to live with that decision. And we can never forget that. No matter how much we think a decision may be right or wrong, we're not living with that decision. And if we forget that, then I think we're forgetting a critical part of what our role is. So the notes that I jotted down that I wanted to pass along to my colleagues here in the legal profession and mediation profession is reframe early on. Ask your client, what outcome do you want? Not just now, but in 5 or 10 years. How do you see going to graduation with the kids? How do you see your relationship with your ex-spouse? Do you see it happening after this decision? And that's not to guilt them, but it's to help them navigate through how to gain the skills to make those events more palatable for themselves and the children, right? So use scenario planning, telling your client best case scenario, work BOTNA, everything that you may have learned in conflict resolution training. What's the best case scenario, worst case scenario, what they may be able to expect with their particular circumstance. And then take it the next step to what's the real impact of this? Like I said before, how will it be during graduation? How do you imagine and what do you want your relationship to be like when you go to extracurricular activities with your kids? How do you want that to unfold? And will this get you there? And how can I help you to get to that point? That's the strategic counselor part of what I think we should be doing as advocates and as mediators, depending on your role. Introduce non-legal advisors, obviously when it's appropriate. I'm not a therapist. I can't counsel on each stage of a child's life, but I can refer to therapists who can say, your children are toddlers, your children are adolescent. This is the type of parenting plan that may be the healthiest for them. Encouraging, even after divorce, if the parents are amenable to it, family counseling, where every once in a while they do a check-in, a temperature check. Why not? Why not? It helps you even have a place to express your anger, help the client understand that they're in an emotional place and they need to separate their emotions from decision making. And again, that's where I think the attorneys who worked with my parents completely failed in that aspect. And they may have been uncomfortable with it. If I want to defend them, a lot of people are uncomfortable with hard conversations, but then they can use mediators to help them in that dynamic as well. But again, that's where you can use other professionals. And then also be realistic with your client. If you're going to continue to argue for these points, recognizing the fact that if your spouse may appeal this, how much is it going to cost? How long do you want to spend on this topic? How much of your life do you want to devote to this? And then I think the summary session with the client should be actually something where you actually have a sit down and say, okay, what do you gain by this? What have you given up? What has the quid pro quo when you make your deal, and help the client process that so that they take ownership of their decision. They don't blame you for it. They understand that they participated in that. And I think that really minimizes regret down the road and helps people process. So
Yeah,
that's my
amazing.
feedback.
Amazing. Great feedback. Thank you, Carolyn. There's clearly a lot involved with law, but I think most importantly, when the lawyer can go that extra mile, reach out and have the right resources and educate those resources, the other professionals involved too, makes a huge difference. So thank you. Aviva, you're up next. Finance, the money, one of the biggest causes for divorce, right? Which doesn't get any better after the process starts. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you. In the films, it was clear that the family's financial situation affected the children in many ways, especially their sense of security and even their level of responsibility. So, where in Split Up did you notice examples of this? And what are some ways financial professionals can help their clients prevent similar negative outcomes?
So, what I saw in the movie was from the perspective of the child, and they didn't talk finances overtly. However, there was a lot of I'm going back and forth between my dad's house and my mom's apartment. I am living in my own bedroom here, but I have bunk beds there. I'm eating here in a certain way, and I get to eat this way in another place. So there was a lot of undertones of inequality, if you will, of the living situation. What I find when I work with clients is that people don't understand that if you're starting with one pot and you are dividing it into two, you are not going to have the same kind of lifestyle going forward that you had before, unless both parents are working and both parents are continuing to bring in, the same amount, or there's a remarriage, which was also brought up in the films. But, what I do with my clients is kind of do a reality check. And we sit down and we go through budgeting and we go through lifestyle analysis and we look at how are you living now and how can you live in the future, given that you're going to have, this amount in child support, this amount in spousal support, and it may not be what you had in the past. We also have to look at the fact that people are living longer and the economy doesn't go up in a straight line and there's going to be fluctuations. And so it's very important how they manage that money. And I find that a lot of times with these families, there's one person who's been managing the money and paying the bills, and the other person is really clueless, not because they can't do it, but because they haven't done it. So a lot of times it's educating the parents and then, looking at it from the child's perspective and showing the parents that, hey, this is going to impact your children going forward. And so the child support part of the agreement is very, very important. And I work collaboratively with the divorce attorneys and with the CPAs, et cetera, to try and figure out what should be the best outcome. And sometimes the best outcome is unattainable because there's limited amount of funds that you can be splitting up. So I find that with my clients, the best thing to do is the reality check of a financial plan and say, okay, this is the pot that needs to be split. This is how it's going to be split equitably. And this is how you're going to be able to live going forward. And you have to take into account longevity because, if you're splitting up and you're in your 30s or 40s and you're going to live till you're 90, that money is going to have to last a good 50 years. You also have 2.5% on inflation on average. So, if your grocery bill was $100 today, then, you're going to have to look at that to be a whole lot more going forward. And so you have to manage that money in order to keep up with that. The kids in the movie were not really talking about the day to day, but there was a lot of undertone in there in terms of how they were living with their various parents.
Well, yeah, all great points and advice. Actually, you answered my next question in that. But I noticed in one of the girls was she had to have extra jobs, right? Like you could see that
Oh, yeah. I
clearly
mean, she
they
got
were
to sit on the
underfunded.
couch and watch TV at the one parent's house, and she had to sweep the floors or mop the
Sure.
floors,
Right.
etc., at the other parent's house.
Yeah.
And that sometimes, is a reality as well, because you have one parent who is going to continue earning money and continuing to have a better lifestyle, and the other parent may be stuck with what they received in their settlement. And unless they can add more to that pot by working or doing other things, then the children are going to have to sometimes, jump in and help with
Yeah. But
chores, etc., which I don't
and
think is such a
yeah.
bad thing. Even for
No,
very wealthy people, I think it's great
of
if you get the
course.
kids doing chores and understanding all of that. But, there is a huge disparity, and it could turn into them being they would prefer one parent over the other because
Right.
of what they're made to do.
Yeah. What would be interesting to me, because I did also notice that there was a girl that actually had to get a job, right? Like she had to help financially, if I'm not mistaken, Ellen. I think that there was one girl that talked about having a job or something, or helping, or what was the other one that was cleaning the house? She had to help her mother because the mother was working so hard. But there are cases where children have to start working at an earlier age to help support. And I'm wondering, I never hear financial professionals talk about that in the divorce and seeing how they can help the children as well, not just the parent, in helping set themselves up and be wise with their finances if they're older children, like teenagers or, um, 16, 17 that are working extra. That may be something that, should be out there
Yeah.
for
I
those.
mean, what we do is I have a team where we put younger people on the account so that they're part of the team. And then when parents have teenage or college age students, what we try and do is bring them in and try and educate them, financial literacy, because it's not taught in schools and a lot of times it's not taught at home. And so it's a matter of, just budgeting and just day to day. If you're
Yeah.
getting $100 on your Apple Pay, that's not going to go very far if you're taking Ubers and doing Uber Eats, on a regular basis. So let's figure out, what you're trying to save for and what you're trying to do with this money. And so little tiny budgets for these children will really help educate them and give them some financial literacy. And then if there's anything left over, you can start teaching them about saving and then, eventually investing. And those are lifelong skills.
I also
Love
think
that.
being aware of the amount of anxiety that housing insecurity can cause for the kids and the change in housing is
Yeah.
profound.
Yeah.
The home as the refuge and just the physical change, leaving the house you were born in or grew up in, and so just wanted
And
to.
a lot of times the house is the largest asset, and
Correct.
it has to be sold and it has to be split up. And that's, traumatic for everybody involved, especially the children.
It's a perfect segue to our next expert, Raquel Ramirez, our real estate professional here. So, when selling a home for divorcing clients, what should real estate professionals consider if their children are or teen, if there are children or teens involved, and how might those considerations differ between the two age groups to help make the process easier and less traumatizing for the family?
That is actually a very loaded question because it's not as straightforward. But first and foremost, I want to thank Ellen for creating these two films. Just to follow up with what everybody has said, I think specifically with Ellen, I'm also a child of divorce. And well, Liz, you know me very well. I'm also a step parent to four kids. I didn't actually end up having children of my own, so I didn't have that experience. But watching these films and seeing how the children have communicated what they went through and all the changes that they had to endure was very eye-opening for me, even as a child of divorce, to see it from from a step parent's perspective. Now, of course, we had to move and I'll say that very openly so that you can understand where I'm coming from. It's not only do I know it from a professional standpoint because I've been working with divorce for something like 15 years now, specifically, but also as a step parent and moving in with my now husband and his kids, it was very interesting how to figure out what would be the right way from a professional and also a personal standpoint. Now, as far as a professional is concerned, one of the first things that real estate professionals need to take into consideration is getting in early on, working with the attorneys or the mediators, whoever is handling the transaction. And the reason I say that is because if you don't have a clear picture of the value of the home, and if you don't have the chance to build rapport with the family, specifically, of course, the parents, then you will struggle along the way and you might end up providing poor counsel to the family and to the whole team. Let's say, if you have the mediator, the attorneys, or the health professionals there. And putting that property on the market then without knowing the specific details might actually prolong the sale process, which can hurt, of course, the family and the children involved. Now, one of the things that I want to bring up to Aviva's point about the financial aspect of it is you have to determine early on whether or not the parents are going to be able to split up and somebody keep the property or if they're going to have to sell it. That's crucial. And then if you do end up keeping it, one of the parents, whether it's the mom or the dad or whomever, you're going to be accounting with fewer funds. So now you went from having a dual income household to a single income household. So that's going to change. So that will determine whether or not you'll be able to stay with the home or actually sell it. In either case, right, you want to make sure that the children who are in the home, whether they're staying or going, are going to have as much of a safe space and familiarity as possible. There are three things that I try to tell other professionals not to do, for instance, if you do have to sell a home. If you do have to sell a home, I would say the first and foremost, and this is actually before you get to the three don'ts, is determine whether or not there is domestic violence. Because if there is domestic violence involved, then you have to sort of take a different approach, right? You have to take security, safety and security. That's the top priority. But in addition to that, there are three things that you don't want to do. A, you don't want to use a lockbox. That's not the thing you want to do when there are still people living in the home, even if the even if the parents say, look, it's going to be fine, we're not going to be home for the next couple of days, don't employ the lockbox situation. You have to really handle this with white gloves. The second thing is tell the family not to change much. There's no need to pick up and box everything up right away. There's no need to take down family photos. There's no need to create that sort of chaos in the middle. And if you have smaller children, say like toddler age, and there are toys and things, you might want to tidy up a bit, but it's not absolutely necessary to make that a sterile environment where they might feel like something big is about to change, even though they understand that there is already change and movement in the house. And the third thing is try to schedule showings when the children won't be home, because that is kind of the worst aspect of it, seeing strangers coming and going all the time, whether it's once or twice a day or three times a week or however many times it's necessary to find the suitable buyer. But try to schedule showings when they're in school or when they're with their other parent if they've already made that transition, so that they are not exposed to that coming and going from strangers in their home. And then to answer the second part of your question, does it change when they get older? And I would say the short answer to that is no. At the end of the day, I think no matter how young or old they are, they don't want to lose that sense of safety and stability. Now, of course, things will change. So, in consulting with the family, in assuming that they're going to move, whether they're going to rent or buy, because that is often a thing that people moving out will often have to do is decide to rent temporarily until they're back on their feet or until they can determine what they need and what they want and how to, accommodate their children. But you want to make sure that they have their own space. even if they have to share a room, say with a sibling, because now you've had to downsize due to the financial strain that the divorce has placed on you, try to give them areas or spaces where they can be on their own, where they can help, process some of the emotion and the turmoil that they're going through when the time comes. In addition to that, I would say try to find a place, whether you're renting or buying, that is near the community that you have raised them in. That is huge because a lot of times people say, you know what, I don't want to be in this side of town anymore. I'm going to move straight across the other side of the city. And I know for legal purposes, you have to be within a certain mile radius to your ex-spouse, but you want to try to stay as close to what is familiar to them as possible, whether that's their school or their grandparents' house or their dad's house or their mom's house, whomever. Try to keep them as close to that as possible so that the rest of their life, so to speak, doesn't have to change that much, so that it's not totally uprooted and disruptive to everything that they've come to learn. You want to give them some sense of stability. So we usually say in real estate, we wear a lot of different hats. We always have to say, of course, we're not an attorney, we're not here to practice law, we're not a health practitioner, we're not here to give you strict counsel, but you do have to dig a little bit and kind of see the whole picture to be able to advise the family that you're working with really what it is that they need to look forward to and the things that they need to kind of check off their needs and wants list before you can counsel them on what they should be looking forward or looking to buy or rent in the near future.
All amazing advice, Raquel. And every time I hear someone say it, or hear you speak, or when we go over the CDS, it amazes me how many realtors don't know this and
Okay.
they help. It is the most important part of the move. It is most important part of their new life or their transition. And the fact that there are people that are helping them guide this process without knowing that is such a shame because every
Yeah.
realtor. And this is a perfect example where you don't think you're a divorce professionals. Realtors would not represent themselves as divorce professionals, but they are if they're helping
Yeah.
someone go through divorce. So that was really great. I know that there's two questions. We'll take these two questions and then we're going to actually have a Q&A because we're hitting 1 o'clock. So we're going to allow people that want to stay for a few minutes of Q&A. Megan asked, how much could or would you disclose to any buyers? I mean, I'm assuming that it's a divorce situation.
I think that would depend highly on the family. There is a theory that if you tell a buyer that the property is being sold because of divorce, that they will make a lowball offer because they think that there is a need, for this family to sell quickly. Um, but I think it really just depends on the family. And that's why it's so important to get in there early and to have deeper conversations and just say, we're selling on such and such date, sign this listing agreement, we'll be out of here in 30 days. It takes a little more hand holding than that. And there is also, and this is why I say that, because if they do crave the privacy, then things such as a for sale sign is inappropriate. You don't want to blast it out to the neighborhood, even though it seems counterintuitive, right? You're trying to sell the property, you're trying to find buyers, but in some cases, the family just doesn't want their neighbors to be, nosing about and to drive around and knock on the door because some people will do that. They'll see a for sale sign and they'll just cut some corners and knock on the door and say, "Hey, I'd like to see your house. I saw the for sale sign." And you don't want that kind of disruption. So you have to talk to the family and kind of get an idea if it's okay to say that. I'm not for just divulging that type of information straight on when I meet somebody. If it happens to come up, then we'll say, yes, this is a divorce case, and we can go through that, assuming that the family is okay with disclosing that information. But it doesn't need to be made public. It's not something that is required, and you don't have to divulge that if it's
Right.
not for the benefit of your client in that case, which would be the seller.
And there's another question, which the answer you partially stated there as well. Can you say again why using a lockbox isn't ideal?
Oh, sure. Using the lockbox is not ideal because A, you don't really know what are their time frames for the family to be home. You don't know if the kids are coming and going, what their schedules might be like, if their schedules are changing. And even if there is a time when the family says, look, we're going to be gone between 2 and 4 every Wednesday, and you allow agents to go there between 2 and 4, you're still relinquishing that authority to them to come into the house, and you never really know when the realtor is going to leave the light on or is going to leave the door unlocked or anything like that. You just really want to stay away from unsupervised showings so that you can prevent those little things that might have a lasting impact on anybody who comes home and says, "Hey, I didn't leave that there," or who came into the house, while we were gone and the lights are on or the front door is open or the back door is open or the cat was let out or whatever. Those are kinds of things that we run into on a normal basis that we have to constantly hound the agents to say, don't forget to put the key back in the lockbox. You want to avoid any of those hiccups. So I don't recommend it.
And I think another important point is that for teenagers specifically that are in the household, this is extremely traumatic. And for them to come home every day from school and seeing a lockbox,
Seeing the
it's just a
lockbox.
trigger and a reminder of what
Correct.
they're going through right now. Same as the for sale sign. So
Correct.
keeping it as, like you said, mentioned, the least amount of change, so that it avoids adding to the trauma that they're already going
That's
through
right.
with this transition. So.
That's right.
Thank you so much. You guys have been incredible. I mean, I think that all of this information is so valuable, and I want to be able to open up so that we can have a few minutes if anybody has any questions, especially for Ellen, that we have her here, that we're blessed to have her here on the call with us. Is there anybody you can, unmute yourself and raise your hand or put in the chat box? Because I do think that a lot was covered today. So we'll give it another, minute. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, there we go. Marianne, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was wonderful. I learned so much from all of you, so I really appreciate that, especially the part about the lockbox. Never thought about those aspects. But my focus is working with families who have a child with some sort of disability or special needs. So I wonder, Ellen, if you've had any experience in that, or that's something that you've run into, or any advice you'd have for those families, or anybody, I guess, can answer that as well.
No, sorry, I don't have any experience with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have had clients that have children with disabilities, particularly non-functional children. It's actually very sad, but it goes back to the same thing is talking to the family and trying to determine what is most important. Do they need to be near a special needs school? Do they need, say, bedrooms on the first floor? Do they need handicap facilities, ramps? Those are kinds of things that you want to talk to them about first, early on as possible so that you don't waste their time showing them places, whether they're renting or buying, that is not going to be suitable. And it's getting to know them as much as you possibly can to offer the best service in the short amount of time possible, because you don't want to prolong this and drag this on for weeks or months at a time.
I've
Great.
also had experience with it on the financial side of things, and you want to be very, very certain that there is a life insurance policy on the moneyed spouse that will pay for whatever the child support is that they agree upon. And the other thing is to set up a trust for the child, and that's something where you want to speak to a trust and estate attorney to make sure that the child is going to be protected going forward.
Thank you.
I think Larry had his hand up. There you are.
Hey Liz, yeah, just question for the group. I joined a little late. I apologize. I did see these documentaries a few years ago, and I just wanted to find out how can we see them again? Are we able to share them? I'm Catholic too. I know that they went through Ellen. They've got this Catholics in Recovery thing, and they've got adult children of divorce. There's, healing the whole body. There's a lot out there with regards to recovery, going through divorce. I'm a child of divorce. I found that those things are very helpful to be in a group discussing the trauma that we're still dealing with all these years later. But I love the documentaries. I'd like to be able to share them with some of my circles, but wasn't sure the best way to do that.
So you can go to our website, which is splitfilm.org, and there are two ways that you can share them. One is you can send clients or folks directly to the website and they can stream it there for a small fee. The other thing that more law firms, mediation groups, and courts are doing, increasingly so, is We have annual streaming licenses. That's some tiered licensing fee where you get unlimited streams that you can share with clients and colleagues. And so that's another option. And all of that information is on the website. Don't hesitate to reach out to me. If you have questions about any of that, I'm happy to walk you through it.
Yeah, I
Perfect.
was
Thank you.
great for that question because I was going to have Ellen, share those things because it's also clearly it is a tool for clients, especially high conflict clients, to sort of see what's the possibilities. And I know that what's amazing about Split Film is that they also have a guide. If you are planning on sharing this movie with your clients, then there's a guide of sort of what to watch out for and how to do it. Because, on one hand, I know they don't want to scare people and, or put certain ideas in people's minds, but on the other hand, you want them, especially if it's high conflict, to know what's the possible outcome and how they actually can take agency in preventing it, and so that their children come out a little bit better, right? So that's all on the site, right, Ellen? There's guides,
Yes,
all of
everything's
that
there. Exactly. Yeah.
is amazing. I urge, I'm a huge fan, Ellen knows, of all of these years. That's why we include the first movie in the CDS program so that people have to, even when they take the CDS, their intention may not be about children and their intention may not be to better serve it. But by the end of it, especially seeing the film, there's no way that you can help a client without having the kid's mind in the forefront of your mind, the kid's benefit. So thank you so much. Is there any other questions? No other questions? Well, first of all, for those that are CDS, there we are putting a code in the chat box because you can use this for your continuing education requirements. I will stay on if there are any guests that want to stay on so I can know who you are. And if you have any questions about NADP or CDS, I'm happy to answer them. We appreciate you all for being here. Can't thank you enough. And, please, 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 if you are a member, add this monthly meeting every month to your calendars because we always have incredible content for you. Is there anything, Nicole, that you wanted to add before
Yeah,
we?
I think that's it. Thank you so much to our panelists
Thank
and
you.
everyone for being here. Great meeting.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye bye, all.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you. So nice to